Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I am so pleased to be here. My name is Melinda George, and I'm the president of the National Commission on Teaching and America's Future. Nothing makes me happier than a whole day that is focused on teaching, supporting teaching, and helping to improve teaching and learning for all of our students. So thank you for having me today. Today, before you, you have leaders in education and leaders in digital technology. I expect that you're going to learn a great deal about how they have been successful, what barriers they have faced, and hopefully some how-to lessons about how we can take what they've learned and are being successful in and scaling it beyond local schools and school districts countrywide. I would also add that I'm a mom of a 13-year-old and 15-year-old, both daughters. You can all wish me well later. And it was interesting in the panel before when we were talking about the effect of a teacher. For my kids, the teachers are everything. They are the ones, if they have a great teacher, they're having a great day in school. The other night, my daughter was on Google Docs working on an English paper, and all of a sudden she said, "Mom, Mr. Shepard's in Google Docs too." And they were working together on her paper at 8 o'clock at night. And that, to me, was the power of connection between a student and a teacher that makes all the difference for a 15-year-old girl. So our topic is professional development, and importantly, what teachers need for professional development and professional learning. And what I'm going to start with today is asking each of our panelists to please do a quick introduction of themselves. And what I would like is one example of a great professional development success story around digital learning. Where have we made a difference? Where have either you seen it in your own work environment or where you've seen it somewhere else? So we're going to start with Sean.
Good morning. I'm Sean McComb. I'm a high school English teacher who has spent many an 8 o'clock evening working on feedback on a paper. I am at Patapsco High School and Center for the Arts, which is in Baltimore County, Maryland. This year I am out of the classroom serving as National Teacher of the Year. Thank you. Last year, I actually had the opportunity to also serve my school in a hybrid role where I had classroom responsibility and I was an instructional coach, staff developer for my school building. And so the success story that I'd like to share is our systems investment in staffing an instructional coach to each secondary school, and what I've seen that allow teachers to take those risks in their practice and really feel like they had the support to do that. So last year I helped one of our English teachers work through Twitter to have students create Twitter accounts for characters in the novels that they were reading, and then have those characters interact, in character, through that technology piece to really have some in-depth understanding of that character. So just a quick story there.
I'm Ruth Okoye. I'm a technology coach in Portsmouth, Virginia. I'm also a Common Sense Graphite certified teacher. In terms of things that are working, I'm thinking about PD models, and the one out of Stillwater, the flipped PD model out of Stillwater, I think is one of the ones that I think is very, very successful. They've been able to leverage some time away for the teachers where they can actually work with their coaches. The coaches deliver information to the teachers to look at before they actually meet with the teachers. And then they meet with the teachers for a 2-hour block during the day, and those teachers have that release time so that they can actually do something with the coach, make something together so that it would actually be able to then be transported into the classroom. And then when the teachers go in the classroom, they have that thing, whatever that learning object is that they've created with their coach, and then the coach can then support them in the classroom as they deliver that to their students. So it's really kind of a wraparound solution. I think that really works very well.
Randi.
So, can you hear me now? I'm Randi Weingarten, and Melinda told me I could still do this panel even though I have a flip phone and an old BlackBerry. I am learning enough to ask the right questions about what's going to replace my old BlackBerry. But the reason I start there is because we all actually start from where we are. And how do we learn enough to engage in a rapidly changing world? And so I could start by saying, you know, I'm a high school teacher from Brooklyn, New York, from Clara Barton High School, and I've spent pretty much the last 16 to 18 years being a president of, of an education union and a nurses union. But the story that I wanted to tell is that a couple of years ago, we started, it doesn't have the best technology, but it has become the fastest growing ed tech company, believe it or not, in America, at this enterprise called Share My Lesson, which is an entity where teachers and others, for free, share with each other lesson plans and other types of things. All you have to do is go on to Share My Lesson, just Google Share My Lesson and you'll get into it. This weekend, we started it July 2012. This weekend, we surpassed 600,000 users, and more than that, 7 million downloads. And so that gives you a sense, more than almost anything else, that this is something teachers want to share with each other. They are lusting for information that will inform their practices in their classrooms. And what it has also done is it has helped us share with our members how technology can be your friend and your tool, not your frenemy and not your enemy, and that it is really an important tool in terms of teaching and learning. Thank you.
Great. So as we think about schools and learning, what if we stopped talking about them as schools and we started talking about them as learning environments? And in a learning environment, everybody in the entity is a learner. And we talk a lot about students needing differentiated learning, personalized learning, student-centric learning. How does this apply to teaching? How can teachers be a part of this same learning environment, and how does that relate to technology? And I'll open it up for anybody that wants to go first.
I'll jump in. So if we're going to think about that environment, we also need to think of the environment that teachers are in right now. I think it's really important to recognize this. So teachers are dealing with an immense amount of change that's happening in all aspects of our job. So from the state level, standards and evaluation and assessment are all changing. These are big blocks to be moving for us. At my district level, the way we take attendance and our grade book is changing, and that might not sound like a big deal, but for a teacher, that's like the everyday nuts and bolts, and that matters. And then even within our school, our bell schedule changed. And so we're talking about all these changes. I haven't mentioned technology yet. And so there's another huge change. So at our school, I was fortunate, our principal decided, wonderful administrator, wonderful leader, to allow to trust teachers to set goals for their professional development and provide them a framework that allows choice so that they can pursue those goals. So instead of saying that professional development is only going to occur these few days before the school year, these 3 days on the calendar, and these after-school meetings, we're going to give teachers flexibility to have the professional development with content and context that fits their needs and allow them to set their goals. And so we created this thing we called Patapsco University, and teachers need to accumulate a certain number of credits. They could get those credits through collaborating with other teachers or some independent study, learning walks to get into other classrooms, opening things up in a way that really does, I think, honor teachers as learners. And just like we want our students to be able to have some choice and pursue their passions and have a personalized learning experience, we want that for teachers as well, because I don't have the same needs as a 20-year veteran, as a new teacher. And so through that context, we found teachers really engaging and going well above that 12-credit floor that we set, and really see that they were trusted with this professional expectation that they can pursue their own learning and their own professional development, and that was a wonderful success for us.
Hey, Sean, before we move on, did this require, on the principal's part and the teacher's part, did this require more money, more flexibility in scheduling, more? What were the conditions that made that possible? Because I think a lot of people would love to see that in their local schools. How did he do it, or how did she do
And
it?
Sean, why don't you also talk about how the new contract helped that too?
So it didn't cost more money. We had the staffed staff development teacher who was able to support the framework and the structure and able to make some of these things happen. But what we really said was, and this is I think a little bit unique to the secondary school experience compared to elementary, is that we can't have one person come in and deliver one content to your math teacher and your tech teacher and PE teacher and your English teacher, right? It's not going to fit everyone. So it was the choice to say that the true experts might be the teacher next door, not the consultant from across the country, and to say we should learn from each other and from the other people who are in that content area, doing it every day with you. And I think it was a values choice rather than in putting more money or anything along those lines.
Great. Ruth?
I think that when you're talking about differentiating for teachers, I think that's good. But I think in terms of what's best for teachers and most successful is really individualized learning. I know that we can deliver certain things to groups, and it's helpful. If they're going to learn how to use a platform, how they're going to learn to use a grade book, they can do that in a group. But every classroom is different. Every teacher's experience, every teacher's need in their classroom is different. I know for me and my school division, we have what we call individualized teacher plans that we work on as teacher coaches, and we've got a responsibility to our teachers. And so what we do is we look at where they are and where they need to go, and we begin to make benchmarks for them so that we can move them up the meter so that they can get to where they need. That means that maybe part of that is doing some group work. But a lot of that is me doing some individualized drive-by kind of things. Go walk in the classroom, what's going on? Do you need something? Do you not need something? Okay, well, let me make sure we have an appointment for your next thing that's on our list, because we need to make sure we're making progress towards where it is we need to go. So, differentiating, yes, but I think individualized really has done more for our teachers in my school division.
So the reason I was teasing Sean before about the contract was about 4 years ago, Baltimore did a very different kind of contract, where the kind of AUs, those credits that Sean was talking about, is part of a very different way of accumulating skills and knowledge in order to both differentiate pay as well as differentiate need. And so that's the kind of, so instead of just, sorry, Deborah, for saying this, instead of going to an ed school and getting a master's and this and that and whatever, you can accumulate credits based upon skills and knowledge, and that's some of the infrastructure changes that Baltimore has done, which it has not gotten the kind of the credit for. So it's interesting to see it embedded in the school that Sean was talking about. That's really because people don't even know that that's what has been embedded in that way. What the question is always this issue about how do you take really good practice and how do you sustain and scale it? And so what have we learned about teachers and about their professional development needs? So someone who is 22 years old right now has a far different view of technology than somebody who's probably in their 40s or their 50s, in that they are more facile with the way in which technology works, and more facile with taking the risk, as Sean and Ruth both talked about, in terms of how to integrate technology in the classroom. They may actually need less kind of professional development on software and hardware than somebody who's in their 40s and their 50s. And so what Ruth just said about how do we actually think about that human behavior and see how we take people where they are and where we need to take them. So what the best schools that I've seen has actually created two things, engagement and trust. And sometimes you use time, sometimes you use other things, other kinds of tools, but the engagement about how do you engage teachers so they feel like technology, software, hardware, whatever, is a real tool in terms of their classrooms for almost any of the ever-changing things that we're doing, whether you're talking about Common Core, whether you're talking about new social studies, whether you're talking about project-based instruction, whatever it is, because technology can hugely help us in virtually everything that we're teaching content-wise, everything that we're teaching content-wise. So you actually have to, so the first is how do we engage people? The second is how do we have the infrastructure? And infrastructure is both the hardware tools, and when I talk about the hardware tools, I'm talking about software, hardware, and the human tools like what Ruth and Sean are talking about. there are times when, and then this gets to what Melinda talked about time. So take a school like the New American Academy in New York City. What they do is they have changed their time schedule for the day, and 90 minutes, the first 90 minutes that teachers are in school every single day is their planning time. That's how they've changed it. And they plan for the day, they plan for the week, they plan for whatever, but every day they have changed their schedule so that they have that 90-minute block before kids come in. So, and some of it is used with each other in planning, and some of it is used with a consultant from outside. They do not have the money to actually have instructional coaches for a lot of different places, so sometimes they import it from other schools, sometimes they import it from the district, sometimes they import it from whatever the bureaucratic infrastructure is right now. Other schools, common planning time routinized at least once a week when everybody is there. Because teachers all, when they're, they'll be on the phone with each other or with kids at 8 o'clock at night. I mean, I used to do my stuff at 5 o'clock in the morning. But but you need to have people together to have that collective conversation. And that's why that kind of common planning time. And the last piece is trust, 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 trust. People will take, I teased about these two instruments at the beginning. People need to take a risk. They need to fail at things. They need to know that, that if they fail and they can't get something done, like if they tweet and it doesn't work, or if they Facebook and it doesn't work, or if they use some software and it doesn't work, you don't want them to actually say, oh my God, I will never try this again. So this notion of trying things and getting facile at it becomes important. So the, common planning time, having the infrastructure tools, as well as the human, development, instructional coach tools are all important, but it's the engaging teachers so that they see the potential and then trusting them to fail and then be able to stand up and succeed.
Great. Ruth, I want to ask you, I want to take something that Sean said and something that Randi said and ask you to respond. Sean said the true expert can be the teacher next door. And Randi said that there's a difference sometimes in what a new teacher to the profession needs in terms of professional development and a seasoned teacher in teaching needs in terms of professional development. How can we use time and collaboration differently so that we can create an environment where both kinds of professional development needs and expertise can come together, and also make it so that people realize that there are resources in their own buildings?
Well, I think, the whole leveraging of teachers, obviously, is really important. The teacher next door, obviously, if they have something going on that they can help and share with, is an excellent resource and can be an excellent resource. But I think a lot of times what we, when we think about pairing teachers, and we want to put, a lot of times folks want to put a younger teacher with a more seasoned teacher, and to think that the younger teacher is going to explain how to use technology, that really is dangerous, a dangerous thought, because being able to understand technology for your own personal productivity needs does not mean that you can actually integrate technology. Those are two very, very different things. And so while the teacher next door may be your best advocate in terms of helping you, we want to make sure that that teacher actually has the pedagogical expertise to be able to help you see what's going on in your classroom and to help you understand what you need to do in terms of management to make it happen, and also what to do when it fails. Because, technology is great. I love technology, but it does fail. And then teachers who have difficulty with technology, they've given away some of their control. And then if the technology fails, they tend to want to then blame the technology, that the lesson didn't go well. But if there's complete planning, and sometimes if there's the teacher next door who's told you, when I did it, I had to have this as a plan B, those kind of things help as well. It really does take someone who's been there and walked in those shoes to help, but it also has to make sure that it's not just somebody who understands productivity with the tools. They've got to know something about pedagogy as well. Because if they don't, they're not really going to be able to help, because they need to be able to help you figure out all the nuances that you possibly can before it actually happens.
Sean, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I would just say, and this might be my perspective from a secondary setting, is that the pedagogical experience of having taught biology and, say, implemented the technology for that biology curriculum, for the skills and the standards that you're working toward, I think married with maybe an instructional coaching expert, I think is really a great combination to have, because when you are specialized, I think it's really important for the teacher to see clearly what it can look like, for it to be modeled for them by someone who has integrated and seen it work in a similar or the same context. And I think that's kind of where we can combine those two efforts to really get something that I think teachers can immediately see and say, I see how I can implement it tomorrow.
And it's, and what teachers who use, at least from my experience, what teachers who use technology well have said to me is that it was a harder learning curve in terms of, as Ruth said, the integration. Not the having small group instruction and, having kids at computers, ringing the room, doing some gaming or some reinforcement. That's different than the integration of technology into your classroom and into your teaching. And so those two are really different. And you see a lot, when you're in schools, you see a lot of the reinforcement skills that happen ringing around the classroom. And that, I'm not saying that that's unimportant, that has a role in terms of enrichment or remediation. But what Ruth is talking about in terms of the real, and Sean is talking about in terms of the real integration, that's where marrying the technology proficiency, or the proficiency over technology, and the pedagogy becomes so important. And what's interesting is that, up until this year, I think, or the last, I would say, 18 months, the debate has been that the tech companies have actually gone around teachers. There's been this debate, and I'm sorry if I don't mean this to be controversial, but there's been this kind of black-white debate about technology, good, bad, technology, supplanting teachers or not. It's crazy. We need technology in schools. And we were teasing before about how schools feel like Blockbuster schools, and kids feel like Netflix kids. And I was teasing with these guys, and they're like, oh, no, kids are well beyond Netflix. They're like, on and on and on. But you're seeing, I think we have, and which is why I'm so glad to be here, I think we collectively have moved beyond the technology good or bad, or technology will supplant teachers. I think we're now at the how do we really integrate, and how do we use this tool in a really powerful way. So it can't simply be the ringing around with having computers and doing reinforcement activities. It is how do we use it, and that's where Sean and Ruth on a day-to-day basis are, their expertise is so vital.
Can I just add, one of my things that I think is really important to add is that some of my best integrators are the more experienced teachers, because the bottom line is all I have to show them, or all the teacher next door has to show them, is how to use this tool, because they understand where it best fits in the curriculum. They understand how to make sure it doesn't really fail horribly, and they also know to have that plan B, because they've got the experience, and they know anytime they bring out something new, they've got to have something going on just in case. And so some of my really best integrators are those teachers who have been, I have one teacher, I introduced her to iPods, right? She's a reading specialist. I introduced her to iPods 2 years ago, and she really, truly doesn't want to retire now. Really and truly. She keeps telling me every time I see her, she's just like, I really wish you would come up with this 4 or 5 years ago. I really don't want to retire. This is her last year teaching, and she keeps telling me, I'm not sure that I'm ready to go because there's just so many new toys. You always bring me a new toy, and she's using things in much more powerful ways than some of the younger reading specialists are doing, because she understands what the children need, and she understands how to get to it a lot faster than some of the younger teachers.
And I think that gets to some of this marrying the pedagogy with the technology innovation and really finding folks that can model in both ways. When I was a 4th grade teacher here in the district, my worst mornings were those when I would walk in and on my desk would be a new binder, and it was the latest program that we were going to do in the 4th grade, and there wasn't somebody who was going to model it for me. And I used to say to the curriculum specialist at our school, can't someone just come in and do this with my class one day? Can't somebody just come in and show me what this looks like with a group of 29 kids? And so one of the questions I would have is about professional development decisions. Who should be making decisions? Who and how should decisions be made about what professional development with technology is needed for the teaching staff?
I think that it should be a combination of a district-wide vision of knowing where we're going, and then a school-based leadership knowing their staff and knowing what the next steps are to get there. In Baltimore County, we are at the outset of a conversion to go one-to-one for 112,000 students over the next 5 years. So that's a huge outset, and there needs to be vision, there needs to be long-term planning on how we're going to get teachers there step by step. But the principal and hopefully an instructional coach at the building level knows the teachers, and they know how to make those smaller steps to help teachers get there in a shorter amount of time. But I really have just had that powerful experience where we trusted teachers to say where they wanted to go, and I've experienced that as a teacher. You give students some choice in the novels they want to read, or between different articles, what piques their interest, and you see the buy-in, you see the engagement raised. And I think that so many teachers have sat through a professional development and 5 minutes in realize it doesn't apply, they don't see it applying to their classroom and their work, and out comes the papers degrade, and off goes the attention on the developer. And so, I think that you need teacher buy-in. You need for teachers to understand why they can be excited about and how it can fit for their classroom, and why they can buy in there.
I agree that needs to be a, marriage kind of, sort of, certainly district level and also building level. And sometimes teachers need to, be given some understanding of why they need to have the professional development, because a lot of times, we'll say, we need to have a PD on XYZ, and they'll come, but they won't engage because they don't understand why. And I think understanding the why sometimes helps smooth over the whole, we need to impose on your time, we need to change your practice. And that whole thing, once we get them engaged in that model, I think they're more apt to and more willing to put away the papers when they're in the PD session, because they understand that at some point this is going to make a change in what it is that's going on. And it's not just been dictated from the top. It's also, there's a reason why it's been dictated, and that really affects my classroom and will change what's going on in my classroom. So, yeah.
I mean, ditto, 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 ditto. But I think that this is, and not to do an advertisement for Common Sense Media, but this is the potential here in this room. For the last decade or so, basically, somebody comes into a district as a vendor to sell people something, right? And so you first get to the purchasing agent, and then you get to maybe the district administrator, then you get to the principal. And it's a sale of something, as opposed to thinking about, and I think, Ruth, we have to actually make sure that people have enough of a common lexicon so that they know the questions to ask, and they know what the potential may be. And so instead of marrying the need of that experienced teacher who actually knows what her kids need, and then marrying that to some technology, what happens is you get the vendor that comes in, and so you got the square peg in the round hole. And so I think that even when we take surveys and we hear from people, like we just did a recent survey, 300 of our members, and the results showed that 2/3 of teachers lack tools to properly implement new classroom approaches. Only 13% are satisfied with their classroom tools. Okay, that's a low number. So the question becomes, how do you change that? But you can't just say to people who haven't really used technology well, okay, by the way, what new things do you need? Because then they're like, they don't have enough information to answer the question. You know, they may come up and say, oh, I want my little flip phone, right? So the question becomes, how do we give people enough information so that they can make an informed choice? And then that informed choice then informs what the district needs, and then you start working with vendors. So all of a sudden, you have some kind of consumer report process, so then you see the buy-in aligned with the commercial entities out there. And I think if we try to figure out how to flip that, and that's why I'm saying I think common sense can help here in a big, big way in terms of helping create some of these platforms so we can have these discussions, you know, within the union, within districts, so that there can be informed choice instead of the other way around.
Great. Let's stick with this theme of industry for a minute, because I think there are a lot of industry leaders who are really anxious to help, to figure out how to improve schooling, how to improve the tools. What's the best recipe for, and how do teachers find the kinds of professional development that they need, and what's the best recipe for industry involvement in that?
So let me start this one, because New York, it's interesting, there's a bit of a schizophrenia on some of this. So Adobe and Apple are now having meetings with our New York leaders of vocational education, CTE, as well as with our New York City president, Michael Mulgrew. And what they realized was that, and he went out to Silicon Valley this summer, he and Sterling Robertson, the CTE vice president, went out to Silicon Valley this summer, and instead of it simply being, first it started as an exercise of how do we help in the CTE area, the career tech ed area, particularly since there's, you know from P-Tech, from IBM, from others, there is this huge need in terms of software techs. And so that started there, and then what they all realized very quickly was, how do we start using the union as a way to have real conversations with teachers in what they need so that industry can actually do what they need. And it's been interesting, because what we're going to start doing in the AFT is start creating more of those meetings with our local leaders and with classroom teachers, so that they can have some of those conversations. But it kind of happened organically this summer, from the we need to help in terms of the tech area and CTE to, oh my God, why don't we actually start talking to teachers about the kind of products that we can create to do the integration and the work that Sean and Ruth have so eloquently talked about.
Great example. Sean, did you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, so I'll say from my perspective as a practicing teacher, how I've gone about finding exemplars to follow is start through Twitter, connect with educators who are doing it, connect to their blogs, connect to Teaching Channel and other videos that show me how they're doing it in practice, in real classrooms, in the real world, and then emulate what they've done. So, and I'll give you a quick anecdote. So a couple of summers ago, my wife and I went to ISTE, the huge technology conference, and we were walking the vendor floor. And it seemed like many of the vendors that we were seeing had come up with something that they thought was really great. But as teachers, we didn't see how that was going to work in our classrooms. The one vendor that did not fit that mold was Google, because they had a bunch of teachers there talking about how they, as teachers, used this tool in their classroom. And so we spent a lot of time there because the free tools, that were being used by teachers in classrooms. And so, it's that perspective. It's, it's time again, and I want to do a little thing on time in a minute. But it's about, I need something that I don't need to transform it into something that can then work in a classroom. I need to see something that can work in a classroom right away, see how it works in a classroom, see it working in a classroom, and then think about how I can just tweak it, customize it for my classroom.
I just would add that,
what Sean does is, a great path. And as a technology coach, it's my responsibility to bring my teachers along to that kind of a path. So what I spend my time doing is to bring those kind of resources, find those resources, and introduce my teachers to things that they could find helpful. Like Teachers First, where they do a webinar once a month on some kind of activity, or, Edmodo has teacher chats, once a week. And so I go with the teachers, because if they've never done a Twitter chat, they have no idea how to do a Twitter chat. So I bring it up on a whiteboard, and the group of teachers are there together, and so we'll do a webinar together so they can understand what those tools are, because they can't participate or get anything from it if they don't even know what it is or how to do that. So I spend some time introducing teachers to how, because if they can't do it on their own like he does, they've got to learn how to do it, So that's definitely what I teach my teachers to do, is to, feed themselves, because I can't do it all. They really have different needs and different things that they're interested in or need. And so if they can learn to feed themselves, I focus more on teaching them to, get it together so they can do it themselves.
Well, and I love what you said, in that you go with the teachers.
Yes.
So I do think, and I think it's been mentioned over and over again, seeing somebody using the technology, seeing how it's integrated into the classroom, makes a huge difference in thinking, okay, I can do this. I can take the risk and go into my classroom and try the same thing.
It's different than when you just get the binder and somebody tells you to do it.
The binder.
I mean, even Nike didn't just do it, right? And it's just a matter of, someone used to do this ditty, which I think I have right. See me, which is what Ruth is saying. See me as a person who really cares about doing the stuff. Show me and send me. And teachers desperately want to, they have a sense of how to teach or what they want to accomplish with kids. But we need to actually, most of us are tactile. We need to, we need to see it, we need to be shown it, you need to send us somewhere if we don't know how to do it in our classrooms right now. And I think that's what the best instructional coaches do. I think it's really daunting, even on Twitter, when you have so many things coming at you, and you can't really assess all of that. And every time you're spending the time assessing all of that, you're not spending the time thinking about what it means in terms of your own kids. And so that's why it's so, the kind of bridging that Ruth does to say, okay, if a teacher can say, this is what I need, and there are people who can say, okay, this can actually help you do that, that's the best.
Earlier this summer, NCTAF had the great pleasure of helping to partner with OECD to release the Teaching and Learning International Survey, or TALIS, in the United States. And Deborah mentioned earlier on a panel that one of the things that was found was that teachers in the United States spend more time teaching students than any other country that was in the TALIS survey. We also found in that survey that teachers in the United States, again, much more than many other countries, are observed more often by their principal and very few times by fellow peer teachers. So my question is, and this gets to something that has been a real theme for everybody, and that's around time and collaboration. That day we released the TALIS results, collaboration was the word of the day. What does it mean to have real collaboration? How can it help with integrating this technology? I smile, I love to hear of a school district that's figured out how to give 2 hours of planning time where everybody's planning together, or 90 minutes at the beginning of every day. How do they do it, and how does it make a difference?
So first, I want to make sure everyone in this room would love to have more time, right? We all need more time, and that's a given. I want to try to give you a concrete example of what it's like, what it was like for me as a teacher. So a full-time English teacher in my high school is responsible for about 150 students. We have contracted 45 minutes of planning time a day. So ignoring making copies, emails to parents, administrative duties, and planning tomorrow's lesson, and let's just say that 45 minutes I dedicate entirely to grading, it's 20 seconds a student, right? If you can, and we know English, right? If you think about someone who's helped you become a better writer, it took far more than 20 seconds to give you the feedback you needed to go through the next iteration of your draft and really learn that skill and learn that practice. So 20 seconds per student is what the contract allots. That has to change. We need a 21st century profession before we're going to get 21st century ready students. And so that's something that we absolutely have to contend with. And so we're looking for policies and practices. It's going to be different contracts and different staffing that honors teachers' time and recognizes that teachers need time to look at work together. We give the same assignment in 2 different classrooms, and we look at what students did, and we talk about how did that happen? How was your instruction different than mine? Let's look at the student work. Let's make sure that my A is your A, that your B is my B, right? That's all the same, and that really does take real time. And teachers aren't afraid of work, right? I worked 55-hour weeks when I was an English teacher, and then on March 5th something happened. We had our first child, and I realized that that's not sustainable over the course of a career, and we shouldn't be asking it of teachers either. And we wonder why people leave the profession. It's because that's what we're asking them to do. And we love students, we love to do it, and I absolutely love doing it. But we have to create the time, and we have to create it during the day while teachers are there. And that's that university model that we created. We have groups of teachers from the similar content area sitting down and looking at the student work produced from someone's lesson and looking at the lesson plan and having those conversations, because our principal, again, made a choice to redo our lunch schedule, to redo daily duties, to give back after-school meeting time, to create an extra 80 minutes a week of time for teachers and trusting them to use it effectively. And this is the cultures that we need in our schools across the country, cultures of trust and valuing of teachers' time and giving them the time they need to change their practice to meet the needs of students.
And can you just say those 3 things again that the principal, the choices that you all made as a staff? You mentioned.
Sure. So is returning after school meeting time. So you realize what's a better return on our time? The committees that are, I don't know what committees ever do, but so these committees or the way our lunch duties work, and then our daily hall monitor duties, roaming duties. He made the choice, can we rethink this so that I'm not just giving someone a duty every day so everybody has the same thing, right? But so that we can adjust it in a way that creates more time for teachers to focus on the work, on working with students.
Thank you.
Just in terms of the collaboration, I know it works. I have my own experiences. When I have a time to work with a teacher, to collaborate with a teacher, we come up with a lesson. And, we pretty much, think it's a good lesson. And so then we then talk about the time that we can then collaborate in the classroom, not just having collaborated outside of the classroom so that we could plan the lesson, but then we collaborate when we get together in the classroom. And so we follow a model similar to what Randi was talking about, where the first part of the lesson, or the first, if we have a teacher who's got several blocks of the same group of teaching activities that she's going to do, the first group I do them all. And the teacher watches me. We've planned that lesson together. She sees how I've decided to make it come off, because it's going to be a little bit different, because I've got a little different flavor than everyone else does, We all do. And then together we do the second or the third group of students, and then I generally pass off that responsibility of doing the instruction to them, and they do it at the end, so that it's an I do, we do, you do model. And it's the same kind of model we try to have with our students. Just, going back to even the first question, the kind of things that we do with our students, do we need to do them with our teachers? And I find that the teachers, generally speaking, are able to work better with that kind of a model that allows me to go in and work with them and model with them, because then they have the confidence afterwards to replicate it themselves. And so the collaboration does work. The time is the problem that we tend to have, because everybody doesn't have time to work together during the day and collaborate. And it's a major, major issue that we face in my school division. Teachers just don't have that kind of time. And it does take time, because, not only are we, learning a new technology sometimes, but when we're learning how it works well in that kind of context that teacher has, and then together creating a plan, that's a process by itself. And then we have to go in and do the lesson and do the classroom thing. So, it takes a lot of time. And, we have to find a way. We really have to find a way to give teachers the time so they can build their practice, so they can work and understand pedagogically how to use these tools. Because if they don't have the time to practice, it's never going to happen.
So I've been both a teacher and a lawyer, and now, administer big entities and enterprises. I don't know of another industry, including what I'm doing right now, where you actually build a plane and fly at the same time. And we tease about that, but think about this. Our accountability system right now is on English and math tests, 3 through 8, that may or may not be aligned with the Common Core, and that schools close based upon these tests, teachers are fired based upon these tests, and students are not promoted based upon these tests. And I said it in the negative because that's how people look at them. And then 1 or 2 in terms of college, in terms of high school, 1 or 2 of these tests. And now these tests basically take, in most districts, a high test prep district is about a month and a half, and then it's all over by April. And if you talk to, or if you have any kids or grandkids, you know that April is now testing month, and nothing else really goes on in April except tests. And then, on top of that, and in a low test district, it's about a month, 2 weeks to a month. A superintendent yesterday was telling me that there are 300 tests in the district in which he's in right now in North Carolina. I think he was saying that to me last night. So that's the accountability system right now, my friends. So take a superintendent. How many of them are going to say, okay, I'm going to create what these guys are talking about so that we can get to this new frontier that we need to get to? How many do you think have the fortitude to do that? Now, I've met 4 of them in the last couple of weeks. I was in Lowell, Massachusetts, and Lawrence, Massachusetts, and Meriden, Connecticut, and New Haven, Connecticut. And all 4 have basically said, we're going to do it differently, and they have figured out different ways, very similar to what Sean and Ruth had said, and now what the New York City contract has done to bake in the time. And the New York City teacher's contract with Carmen Farina and Michael Mulgrew, they now bake in the time. And there was a lot of controversy. Why are you really getting rid of that 37-minute period that never actually really worked for kids to have tutoring to bake in this time to do this? Why are you getting rid of the school meetings to bake in the time? So they've done that. They've made that bet on a citywide basis. But if we don't actually align our policies to what we are saying is important in terms of the practice, what will happen is that people will always focus on the shortcut way to try to get to higher test scores, even if we all know that that's not the right way to do it. And that is our dilemma in Washington right now. We need more time. Talis is absolutely right. I think it was eye-popping for people. We've known it, but I think it was eye-popping for the policymakers to know that we actually have more instructional time in the United States than the other countries that outcompete us. They actually are engaged in more of this Japanese lesson study about really working their craft so they become incredibly good musicians, incredibly good artists, and incredibly good scientists.
And we have a messaging job to do. I mean, the folks in this room, you all have great networking circles. And one of the things that we talked about with Talis, the Talis found that American teachers spend 27 hours in a class, at the front of the classroom, or teaching anyways, compared to other countries who are in the 19, 18 range. And yet, if I went to some of the parents in my kids' school and I said, can you believe it? Our teachers spend the most time teaching kids. They would say, well, thank goodness. Thank goodness, where else should they be? And that's partly because our view of schools is what we remember, which is our interaction with teachers. We need to remember the whole teacher, all of the pieces that go into teaching, and we need to communicate that message to folks so that everybody's focusing on the whole teacher and how we meet all of those needs to make them, as Randi said, the most facile in being able to take the risk, try new things, and really improve teaching and learning. So with that, I'm going to invite people that want to come up to the microphones to ask questions, because we have a great panel here, and I really want to make sure that you all get some of the burning questions that are in your mind. And while folks are coming to the microphone, I'm going to ask, Randi, you mentioned 4 superintendents. I would love to know what your recommendation is for any superintendent. Sounds like you guys are in some rock star school districts that have really made some good moves toward integrating digital learning and supporting teachers in that effort. But what would you recommend to somebody who's just starting out and trying to figure out how to do this? What do you need to do as a superintendent, and how does that leadership meet the needs of the teachers?
Wow. So if I get to tell a superintendent what to do, I would think that...
It's a big day.
Oh, wow.
Here, in the microphone.
I would just say that I think, in Baltimore County, I think that we're doing it in a very thoughtful and strategic way and saying we want to get to this very, very different place, but we need to support teachers every step of the way in order to get there. So for every change that you want to make on your way to 21st century teaching and learning, what are the supports that you're going to build in, whether that's time, whether it's a fantastic instructional coach, whether that's access and infrastructure. How are you really going to get there? Do you have a roadmap? Have you looked at some other places that have already been there or ahead of you and compared your roadmap to theirs? Learn lessons from others, and really doing it strategically, not just jumping before you've really looked at where you're going to land and how you're going to get down there, but really taking your time and doing it well.
Great advice. Ruth? Randi?
So I'm not really good with the soundbite, but tools, time, and trust. And walk in the shoes of your teachers and your principals. Don't just exhort. We all feel an urgency to help our kids succeed. Nobody would go into teaching if they didn't, and if they have, you can see that in one hot New York moment. So how do you create the tools, time, and trust in order to move ahead, not just the exhortation, which is really important, but not just the exhortation. And the last thing, and this is the hardest, which is what are you going to take away in order to do something? Because most of us are mere mortals. And if you actually layer more and more things on us, I mean, Sean said this before about the 20 seconds per child's paper. And college professors know this too. As a social studies teacher, I know I taught in the dark ages of the 1990s. The more time I spent on the first papers, the less time I would spend on the last papers. And I used to have, if I had a full load, I'd have 150 to 200 kids. And so I would constantly switch which class I would start with. And it's not that I wanted to spend less time, it's just my mind was tired. And so the question becomes, when we want to do something to transition to something really important and new, if we don't take other things away, what's going to happen is that teachers are going to try to do it all, and we won't do any of it well.
That's true.
Ruth, any advice for a superintendent?
Actually, I really think that the most important thing a superintendent could really do is to talk to teachers who are using technology and integrating it well. And then ask them, how long did it take? How much time did you invest? And then realize that that is something that they want to have replicated across different classrooms, and know that that number, the teachers who are really doing it, really integrating, that number needs to be met somehow, and find a way to meet that number. They've got to make the time available if they want to see it happening.
Great. We have a question over here at the mic. And if you could say who you are before you start.
Hi, I'm Roseanne Jaborski, Assistant Executive Director of the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, and I spent a great deal of my career doing professional development. So in many cases, and I think some of you have alluded to this, teachers are almost conditioned so that professional development is seen as less than relevant. And kind of this too shall pass mentality. So I once heard the statement, like, if I die, I hope it's during an in-service because the transition will be seamless. So I guess the question to you is, how do you change that mindset so that professional development is more meaningful and relevant, and not that this too shall pass with the next administrator?
So I had that saying on my above my computer with a big X through it, so that it wouldn't feel that way in my school. Last year was the hope, and I think that the key there is job embedded, so that the professional development is happening at the point of instruction with teachers in the classroom, so that they see how the change happens. They can see it during their school day. They're supported maybe with an instructional coach, right, showing them the way, but that it's not a quick anecdote. I remember a few years ago, our principal brought in a consultant for the first 2 days of back to school, when all we can think about is the mountain of work we had to do to get ready for the next Monday and get the classroom ready and everything else. So instead, they bring in this person who is just a setup for failure, unfortunately. And so I think we need to be kind of strategic about the way that we do professional development, and that it's very practical and it's very realistic.
I would have to say relationship. One of the things, I do professional development. That's what I do, and one of the reasons why my teachers suffer through what we have to suffer through sometimes is because we have a relationship, And I tell them sometimes, you just have to wash the dishes. And today, we're going to wash the dishes, And other days, we do get a chance to do really cool things. But, sometimes we have to just wash the dishes, But because I've got the relationship with them, they understand that, today's not going to be too cool. But tomorrow we might actually do something that, is focused on what it is I think I need. And so we can weave that, the bad with the good, But again, I get to leverage relationship, which is something when you bring somebody in, they don't have the opportunity to do.
Look, I think it's the same as, it's the same as when you're going through any change process. If people don't see it as relevant, they, people have to see it as relevant, and there has to be the relationship trust. And if you can create the relevancy and the relationship trust, then, then people start teasing about, then they start teasing about things that don't go well together. And I love this, today we just had to wash the dishes. Mm-hmm. But it's just, but, think about, Melinda said this earlier, think about how many times teachers have gotten, okay, this is the greatest, newest thing, and we're doing it this year. And then next year, this is the great, I grew up, my mom was a teacher for 29 and a half years. And how many times did I listen to her and her friends tease about the greatest, newest thing that was just plopped on their desk with one in-service about it? So relationship building and relevance.
And ongoing.
Yes,
Not just one delivery and then see you later.
Exactly,
Yep.
exactly.
Hi, I'm Linda Birch, Common Sense Media. This question of time is such a big one. And listening to you all, I know that the most valuable way to do professional development is when students are in school, schools are in session. But I'm curious about whether there are really innovative ways and more creative ways to think about summer months and how that time could be used, and what would be the conditions, whether it be around compensation and funding or contracts, that allow that time to be used more productively in this new era.
I actually, one of our biggest initiatives where I am is what we call Teach Academy. And what we do is we spend 3 days, and it's an awful time, but it is really the best time. The first 3 days of summer vacation, we have teachers actually come in and come and stay and work with us as tech coaches. Our whole team is there. And what we do is we tell them to bring their curriculum materials and that bring something that you want to work on. And we work together for those 3 days, and it's a long 3 days. But we work on it, and they have a chance to work with somebody who's going to make something relevant to what's going on in their classroom. So it's a lesson that they've decided that they're going to do next year that they have a chance to put together, and then they refine it a little over the summer, and then we see totally different things happening in the fall with those teachers because they've had the concentrated time. And like I said, it's an awful time, but it really is the best time. We get it out of the way, and then they can have the rest of their summer. And, our teachers come voluntarily. We had 150 teachers come voluntarily for 3 days of PD right after school had let out this past summer. So, for us, that's reworking summer.
So who in this room thinks that most schools open most public schools open after Labor Day. Right. So most public schools in the nation right now start in August and just continue through August. And so part of the dilemma now is actually how to have a lot of teachers actually work during the summer in second jobs and third jobs and fourth jobs. The summer camps are ready to kill all of us because of all of this stuff. And if you think about a big lobby, for example, in the Northeast, the summer camp industry is a really big lobby in the Northeast and is one of the reasons why you don't have year-round schooling. Now, I'm not making a judgment call here. I'm just telling you it's one of the reasons why you don't have year-round schooling. And you have also lots and lots of teachers getting skills and knowledge over the summer. And we need to actually work with ed schools about how to actually do something to integrate that more into the districts in which they work. Having said all of that, the summer months, really, we should really be thinking about how to use them differently. And frankly, we should be thinking in the United States, in some ways, what some of our European colleagues do, which is that a lot of people actually take the same period off because people need that time off. And instead of staggering it, which is what's going on in the United States now, a lot of teachers take off like the first week of July or the second week of July. Most teachers are now working in the last few weeks of August, or in August. So, but I think your point about how we align it back to issues in terms of professional development in school districts is really important. And the other thing that's really, really, really important is how we stem summer learning loss for kids. That's really, really important. And how to create other kinds of things like maybe project-based instruction or, a city reads program and things like that. And all of that could actually be aligned together.
Okay, we have time for one last quick question with some quick answers, because I can see lunch out there, and I know everybody's dying to get there. So,
Okay, well,
and I know Keith, so he can do this
I'll
for
be real
us.
quick. Keith Kruger with COSIN, and I want to come back to your discussion about what superintendents should do, because I see Mark Edwards from, wave Mark, who you're going to hear from later, Superintendent of the Year last year, and I think what we hear from him and people like Dallas Dance is staying focused on what the learning looks like, not on the device. Too much work. And I've got to do a shameless plug for this Thursday. COSIN, along with AASA, will be putting out a new toolkit for superintendents on being empowered in a digital age. So if you want to know about that, it'll be free and downloadable on our website.
That's quick.
That was quick. Thanks, Keith. All right. I want to thank all of our panelists today. These are the folks that are making a difference in schools, and there are millions more like them across this country. And our goal and our work needs to be around supporting them, around all of the things that Randi mentioned, tools, time, and trust. I would also add in learning, practice, and scale. And so thank you all for being here. Thank you for having this be focused on teaching, and enjoy lunch.
And thank you, Melinda.
Thanks to this terrific panel. And I just want to remind people we're going to be doing at lunch. So get your lunch, come back in here, and we're going to do something that may seem impossible. We're going to do it, which is to actually try to have something come out of this meeting. And we're going to start with that over lunch, talking about what good ideas have emerged so far that you want to either see developed further during the afternoon, or you hope will be part of the continuing process that the League Commission, Common Sense Media, and Sunnylands will continue. So have a great getting of your lunch, and we're going to reassemble here in a few minutes.